This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. Today we're chatting with Hugh Montgomery. Hugh is an incredibly impressive person who has achieved a great many things throughout his career. He's a physician, professor of medicine, and in 2022, he was appointed an officer for the Order of the British Empire for services to intensive care medicine and climate change. In today's episode, you'll hear Hugh talk about how his career began. He'll give his honest impression of how things are looking for us right now. And I'll ask Hugh possibly the biggest question there is there hope? Let's jump in. Hugh, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's really exciting to have you on the show for a whole range of reasons. You were, in 2022, appointed Officer of the Order of the British Empire for services to intensive care medicine and climate change. So it's safe to say you've achieved a lot in your career. But to start things out, let's go back to the beginning. How did this all get started for you?
Raised in Plymouth, medical parents, thought I was going to be a diver for a while, ended up doing medicine. Intensive care medicine was my thing. And I stumbled into research, which turned out I wasn't bad at doing. And the climate change was accidental. So the research I was reading and trying to publish in was in the big journals, Nature, Science. And if you've ever read those journals, I always describe them as like a highbrow Cosmo. There might be something on what I was interested in, epigenetics, for instance, but next to it be something about string theory or early hominids or black holes. So I would naturally look at those and go, well, that's quite interesting. There were papers in there that looked to me to be very, very frightening about climate change. Very frightening. But it was a time when the newspapers were all saying there's no such thing as climate change, the world's getting colder, and the disparity between the two is pretty stark. So I thought, well, this is clearly an important question, so I need to spend a couple of years to understand the science and work out what the truth is. So I spent a couple of years reading climate science and getting to understand it. And when I did, realized that we were in much, much worse trouble than anyone else realized we were in, that we were looking at the end of days. And in a very short time frame, within a generation, not within multiple generations. So I've spent the last 25 years trying to do something about it and failing. As well, I suppose as Edison said, I haven't failed, I've just tried 10,000 things that don't work. I've written schools, education programs, I've worked with the World Health Organization, been to the conference, the parties negotiations, had a post with the Greater London Authority, organised meetings on security and health and climate change, founded the Lancet Commissions on climate change impacts on health, run the Lancet Countdown, which I've done for 6 years. That's now 47 countries. So done a lot of things that haven't worked.
And so help us understand, you started in intensive care medicine and then climate change. So is there things that they have in common?
Well, the connection for me, there are many connections. I mean, firstly, a vast amount of what Western healthcare sees in critical illness or in hospital is entirely preventable disease. And a very, very large amount of that, by chance, would be entirely preventable with low-carbon living. So what's good for the planet is good for health. If you drive everywhere and you're sedentary and you chuck diesel particulates out the exhaust pipe or tyre wear or brake wear or road wear, the sedentary lifestyle is really bad for you. The lack of activity, separately actually, is very bad for you. The breathing, the pollution is very bad for you. If you eat a diet that's largely ultra-processed foods and is red meat heavy and dairy heavy, that is bad for you. If you eat the low plant stuff, the high plant diet, and you take exercise, it's good for you. Very good for you. Tens of cancers largely disappear. Heart disease largely, there's a whole raft of things. So that's one connection. Low carbon living would remove probably the majority of patients on my intensive care unit. I think the other connection is really a way of seeing the world and how one responds to it. So if you were unfortunate enough to come into the emergency department in my hospital with something catastrophically wrong with you, I get called and you will see me at your bedside in 30 seconds. And I have to have a system of response that will save your life. So I will deploy whatever is required that will work. It might be you're bleeding out from a leg, a tourniquet. It's quick, it's simple, it's cheap. That goes there. Or I'll say to someone, put your thumb here and press hard and don't move until I tell you to. Then I will order some O-negative blood and get a line in. I will do the things that I can do. And ultimately, you might end up on an intensive care unit for months. You might end up needing some new drug that I need someone to invent. Climate change, we seem to do it the other way around. We all go, oh, well, we need carbon capture and storage, which we haven't yet invented. And we're going to therefore make it this thing called net zero, which is therefore impossible. As opposed to doing the things we can do now, which is eat a plant-based diet or move your bank account or change your electricity supplier to 100% renewable. Quick, easy things, the tourniquet equivalents.
Why are you so passionate about this, and where's the fire for this change come from?
That's another good question. I think some probably deep-seated moral responsibility for the planet we live on, destroying it, and we are triggering a mass extinction event we will have in place within this generation if we don't act. It's a bit like slashing a Rembrandt. Why would you do that? But for other people, why would you cause so much suffering and pain in the world? And actually, closer to home, I guess, I have one son left alive, and he's 18. And on a personal basis, no parent is going to slaughter their own child by their own greed. That would just be psychopathy writ big, wouldn't it? And if I fail, I need to be able to look him in the eye and say, mate, I tried. I really tried. I did my level best for you. So I guess those are my predominant drivers. And of those, the biggest of them is the family one. It's my son.
So you're also currently the director of the UCL Centre for Human Health and Performance. What does that focus on?
To cut a long story short, we were trying to understand the mechanisms of disease that are very complicated, and sometimes it's hard to work them out. So, for instance, a lot of our patients have low oxygen levels on intensive care because their hearts aren't pumping enough round, or their lungs aren't working to get the oxygen in, or they're very anemic, and there's not enough hemoglobin to carry the oxygen. And we needed to understand how the body adapted to that low oxygen if we were going to manage the patients better. And it turns out you can't do that in an intensive care patient because everything is out the box. If you've just been run over by a steamroller or you've got some horrible infection, everything you measure will be abnormal and you can't really work out the pathways. So the way into that was to take healthy people and just lower their oxygen levels. So that meant climbing Everest and building labs on the South Pole and doing the experiments there. And we did the same thing, for instance, with heart growth. If you get a thick heart muscle, let's say from high blood pressure or kidney failure, diabetes, it's bad for you. Could we understand what made hearts grow? Well, again, the easy way to do that is in a disease state, too difficult. So I took army recruits and their hearts grow with exercise, and you can do the genetics and you can find the mechanisms that way. Same with wasting in cancer. Wasting, too complicated. Let's look at what makes muscles grow. So essentially, the Institute's focused largely on that. But I'm largely shutting it down because there is no point in finding cures for cancer if everyone's dead from climate change. And that's the situation that will very shortly be the one we're in. So it's illogical for me to carry on. It's exciting and it's interesting and it's fun and it's rewarding and people clap you on the back and say you're a jolly clever fella. But it's pointless. As a friend of mine said, he's a cancer specialist, and he said, what's the point of finding cures for cancer if everyone's dead?
Let's go there. From your unique perspective and factoring in some of these big existential challenges that we face, how would you describe where we're at the present?
If we're teetering on the edge of the cliff, that's lucky. We've probably fallen off the edge of it. I am deeply pessimistic, actually, sadly, that we can fix this problem now for reasons we can discuss. But the logical answer, and I've spent a lot of time researching survival over the years, psychology as well as the biology, the only logical answer when your life is threatened is to act as if there is a chance. If the boat sinks and you go, oh, I've had it now, then you've had it. If you go, right, I'm going to fight for the life raft, I'm going to swim like crazy to see if I can't just get somewhere, then you're in with a small chance. And that's, I think, the situation we're currently in. If you look at ecosystems, you know that we've lost over 70% of all vertebrates on the planet since I was 8 years old. I'm 62. That number's still continuing. We're losing 8 species an hour to extinction that we know about. That's without climate changing even coming in. This is just the way humans are massacring our planet. And we teeter on the top of a very, very delicate pyramid, and we're hacking away at its base. When that collapses, we go with it. If you then start adding in climate change, we're putting in, if you include other greenhouse gases, the equivalent of over 50.3 billion metric tons of CO2 equivalent a year. And a billion tons is 1,000 million tons. And a ton is 1,000 kilograms, and each kilogram is 523 litres. And a fifth of that will be cooking us in 33,000 years' time. This isn't something where we can, in 5 years' time, go, oh, yeah, we might just be able to switch the tap off now and it will go back to normal, because it won't. We will have launched ourselves off the cliff with no brakes. So we are in catastrophic trouble, and there's only one positive out of all of this, which is we are the only generation of hominids ever to have had the chance to save our own species and our own biosphere. And in many ways, that's an honor, isn't it? We are that people. We are that generation. We're the only generation that has ever had or will ever have that chance again. And if we all work together fast, we're in with a chance, and we can be the heroes of the day. So it can be empowering, but we have to act responsibly. That means acting together.
You've described a couple of the ways in which we got here, but what's at the heart of how we got here?
Well, you could frame that in a number of different ways. I think originally probably fair to say ignorance. I would imagine in the 60s and 70s, people hadn't really grasped, even though we knew of the greenhouse gas effect since mid-1800s, really what that was going to do. We didn't really understand that burning fossil fuels was going to cause us harm, because it was making drugs and improving lifestyles and getting more food, and changing agriculture meant that starvation was disappearing. And I guess we started, therefore, with ignorance. But once we started getting the data, I think there have been a number of other driving forces. The first remains ignorance. Many people just didn't know the story. Many politicians didn't know the story, and they didn't want to hear the story. The second is that it became politicized. So trying to save rainforests or moving to plant-based diets or reducing fossil fuels was labeled as some tree-hugging left-wing communist, destroy civilization as we know it, or at best flaky, muddle-minded, tree-hugging, finger-knitting, muesli-eating. It got branded in that way, so ignore these nutters. And the third thing was vested interest. And some of that was evil, bad people who just want to make their money in the next 3 or 4 years. And that's still the case. People will still act they can just get the share value across the line next 3 years. They can cash in and they're all right, Jack. Some of it is just that if you've been raised in that sort of system, let's look at the fossil fuels. Can you expect a company to walk away from, let's say, 26 trillion and strand those assets? If you've been through the corporate world and you've reached 55, that would be anathema to you, wouldn't it? You're just like, hang on, what? I just sacked that much money? What we've got to get people to understand is, yes, they do. They do have to do that. I know it's difficult. I know it's not the way we've raised, but this isn't an issue for future generations. This isn't about our great-grandchildren. And that's who we have to appeal to, or what we have to appeal to. If you have children, you have a stark choice now. You slaughter them for short-term gain, or you do the right thing. And we should do the right thing.
And so you talked a little bit about this generation being the one that can change things. Are you hopeful in this situation?
No, I'm generally very, very pessimistic, but I do have some hope. And I will give you the one example which advertisers always use, and advertisers don't know what happened. We used to have a problem with drink driving in Britain. And when I was a youth, for the record, I have never, ever got behind the wheel, ever having drunk anything, because I just think it's wrong. But there was an attitude that it's what blokes did, right? Yeah, go down the pub, have a couple of beers and drive home, right? And it was normal and it was acceptable. And there were advertising campaigns every year saying, don't drink, drive, and nothing happened. And then suddenly, over about 18 months, it changed. Suddenly, it was the thing that you never did. And people would be letting people's tyres down if they were going to get behind the car. It's just like, you're doing what? You think you're going to drive home after a couple of beers? And no one really knows what changed. It must have been a constant narrative that suddenly gelled, and enough people started moving that everyone else wanted to join the gang. And that's the only hope I have. I do get a sentiment. The fact that we're sitting here having this conversation now, I don't think probably we would have had this conversation 20 years ago. But there are people out there now who want to do this. And I do have a sense that we might be at some tipping point now. I'm not optimistic, but I do have there's something bubbling under here that makes me think that people listening to this podcast have either made these changes or are going to jump right now when they listen and going to get the 7 other people to move. And we should comment on that, having lived through the COVID pandemic on an intensive care unit. Remember what happened when we had an R value of 3.4. So let's say 4. I infect you, that's 5 people. The 4 people I've infected each infect 4, that's 16. 16 plus 5 is 21. Those 16 infect 4, that's 64 plus the 21. The numbers got really steeply. With an R of 3 to 4, you end up by the 10th passage with over 90,000 people infected. And if you start doing the maths after that, that's the nature of exponential functions. We all have advertisers, sellers, 7 people who either love us enough or respect us enough to do what we ask them to do. So they might go, well, Paul, I think personally you're a bit of a nut job, but you know what? I love you, so I'm going to do it. Or they go, well, Paul knows what he's talking about. He's a smart guy. He's looked at this. I'm going to listen. 7 people. If each one of us finds those 7 people and helps them make the move, I say to you, Paul, come on, mate, move your bank account to, I'll get a bottle of wine in, come over, we'll get drunk, and we'll move your bank account. We can all do these things.
So what would you say those things are that are the biggest opportunity for us to do?
They're boring. But the nice thing is they're boring and they're easy. So, number 1, move your bank account where you can. In Britain, it's easy, to a bank that doesn't fund fossil fuel extraction. There's an open banking platform. You just literally fill in the form and everything happens. I've done it myself. Your direct debits move over. It's completely painless, okay? And there are banks, the Cooperative, Nationwide Building Society, Monzo, Triodos. You do that, you suddenly no longer funding fossil fuel extraction. But those banks are lending really heavily on what you put through that account. So you've got huge leverage. Suddenly that little thing that you did is now having a really big effect. So that's number 1. Number 2, move your power supplier to 100% renewable. There are lots of good companies. In Britain, Octopus Energy comes out number 1 for customer service, it seems. I'm with Good Energy, they're fantastic. And then you switch the lights on at home and all your electricity is coming from renewables. Food, 34% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system. And it's easy to move to a largely plant-based diet. I've done that, and I'm a doctor. I did it for the planetary reasons, and then went, oh, now that's interesting. My risk of bowel cancer is less. My risk of cancer is less. My risk of dementia is less. My risk of obesity is less. I'm healthier and happier. And you know what? Plant-based foods can be really bloody tasty. And because I'm a doctor and I'm very busy, they're also dead easy to cook. It's quick and simple. So that's another one. I'm not going to say you've got to be a vegan. I'm just saying make it largely plant-based where you can. Transport, another one. Don't travel if you don't have to. If you do, walk, cycle. I've walked down here today, an hour and a half's walk. It's lovely. I just set up earlier and I enjoyed the walk until it started raining on me. Thanks, London. If you are going to use transport, cycle. If you can, use public transport. If you have to, use mass transport. If I have to, do a car share. Try not to fly. Notice I didn't say never fly. We're all sinners, right? I'm a sinner. I do things that I should not do. We're all able to hold these 2 narratives in our minds at once. Don't beat yourself up if you eat that steak. Don't beat yourself up if you take that flight to visit a mum who's poorly abroad. If we all just start making these changes, but substantially, the world will change very, very quickly because the money moves. That's the big thing here. You and I were shooting the breeze before this, talking about individual responsibility. We all have responsibility to do what's right. But when we do, and we bring others with us, things change, particularly because of the leveraging power of the financial markets. When people start seeing us moving our banks, the other banks will follow. When we start moving the way we buy food, the food industry will change. We can change the world.
So one of the things and responses that you've had to this challenge is founding an organization called Real Zero. Tell us a little bit about Real Zero and what does that look like in the world?
We obviously all do have to be doing everything everywhere all at once, but you only have so many hours in the day. So for me, it's about trying to find, while I try to do everything everywhere all at once, it's where's the leverage point? And for me, it's quite clearly about moving the money. Where's the money I can move? My ecosystem is healthcare. So we are somewhere between 10.3 and 12% of global domestic product. So of every dollar spent in the world, north of 1 in 10 is directly on healthcare. It's probably nearer 12 in 100. And we are a relatively constrained ecosystem, and we have a moral clarity in that no healthcare company, drug company, whatever else, could have collateral damage, kill people off whilst making money out of curing. So whilst we're only 5.2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, our leveraging is the money. And if I can decarbonize our scope 1, so that's burning fossil fuels directly, scope 2, the power we buy, and scope 3, the procurement and supply chain, and I can get that narrative and get that to happen, that leveraging, that $10 in every 100 move, I'm hoping will move the hedge funds and the pension funds and create the cascade. We've also got a good narrative because low carbon living, as we've said, is really very, very, very healthy. And I don't want a colostomy bag, thanks very much. I don't want to get dementia. I'm going to die of something. I don't want to get these horrible avoidable diseases. And low carbon living is very healthy. We've got a good story here.
In terms of just one of the things that I always like to do is ask people a bit of a fun question. You said that cooking plant-based food and vegetable-forward food is really easy. What's one thing you're enjoying eating right now?
Oh, right. Okay. So I'm going to tell you about a book which I read, which changed my life. It's called Eat and Run. Have you come across it? Scott Jurek's book?
No.
It's a great book. I really like this book. Okay, and I read it because I liked running. And Scott Jurek was the world ultramarathon champion. And he talked about his dietary journey in this book. It's not why I read it. And it starts off with basically, if I'm completely crude, he's trying to get into bed with a woman he's met. And she's vegetarian. So he thinks, well, maybe I'll eat a bit more veggie stuff. And he found he started running faster and thought, now this is interesting. So he started body hacking. Long story short, he ends up winning the World Ultra Series as a raw vegan. But in the book, he makes the point to say, I needed quick food, but it had to have lots of calories in. It had to have all the protein and essential amino acids and fatty acids. It had, I'm an elite athlete. It has to have all those things in. But more importantly, it has to taste fantastic. Because when I get in, I need to really look forward. So I got introduced to things like all the fermented soy products, raw yeast flakes, for instance, which I'm sure you'll know all about, but they taste of toasted cheese, shelled hemp seeds, which are weird because you can shove them on a salad or on fruit, and whatever you put them on, they seem to taste great. So that was my little mixture, because I suddenly found there were these things I could add along with chili, which was always my default. Suddenly I could take anything and I could make it taste wow, because these products have got that they've got that lovely... deep, savory flavor, which I found I couldn't get normally if I just had steamed broccoli. So that was my thing. I'm really enjoying yeast flakes, shelled hemp seeds, and fermented soy products.
And before we finish off, you're obviously a very multi-skilled person. You've got a lot of different things throughout your life. You've been involved. You've held a skydiving qualification, a commercial diving license. You've climbed a number of mountains. Out of all of these, what do you look back on most fondly?
I guess it's always going to be two things. It's always the people, because if you're climbing a big hill, the big hill is part of the thing. It's the wilderness, it's the solitude, it's the taste of the air, it's the color of the sky. So those things are important, being in the natural world. But it goes with it is the sharing that experience. So I suppose of all of those things, it's the experience itself, but it's who you're with. It's like going to a great gig, isn't it? You can go to a great gig and hear the most fantastic band. I could name lots I've seen. Dave Gilmour at the Albert Hall, right? Brilliant. But so much better if there's someone with you that you can feel their pleasure too. So I guess if I had to choose one, I guess it would be a little hill, not a big hill, not a Himalayan or an Andean one, in Wales, coming up to Christmas, thick snow, ice, with a friend of mine, not a difficult climb. And we ended up 4:00 in the afternoon watching the sunset with the clouds below us. Special.
Well, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And let's see what we can do, right? And everyone listening to this, get empowered. Let's all work together and change the world, not in a year, but tomorrow.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.